So in this video, I want to talk about collecting or measuring points. And there's a couple ways that you can do this, and there's a couple reasons why you would want to do this. So um, real briefly, I'll talk about how you can switch between the prism and the laser. So each one has their purpose. If I want to measure some points that are hard to reach, but I can visually see them through the instrument, I can turn the laser on and I can measure the points that way. Maybe I've got a piece of ductwork up in the ceiling that I want to measure its location. I can simply turn the laser on, point the laser at that ductwork, and then hit measure, and it'll record its location, XYZ coordinates and description and point name and all that stuff. The other thing that I can do is I can measure stuff with the prism. So maybe there is a storm sewer system on the project that I'd like to record where it's located. So when it gets covered up with dirt and I need to come back to that area again and dig, I know exactly where it is and how to avoid it because I've recorded its location with some of the points. Or maybe I'm going into an existing building and there's some equipment or some equipment pads or whatever, and I want to measure its location. I could use the prism pole or the laser to locate and measure exactly where that stuff is located, and then get that file back to the CAD department, and they could design around it or up to it or tie in with it. So there's kind of a lot of different things that you can do. So I'll just kind of show you a couple examples and to give you guys an idea. But the one thing I do want to say is the main reason why I use collecting data is I use it for transferring control points. And this is something that's very important. It can really save you time and energy down the road. And what I mean by transferring control points is typically the general contractor or the surveyor or whoever it is going to give you some control points if you're lucky, okay? And they're going to give you a few control points on the job site. But the reality is they may not be in the most ideal place for you to set up your instrument. So what I'll do is I'll set up using the control points that they give me, but then I'll do something that I call transferring control. And that's simply going around the job site and making marks, either on the floor or on vertical surfaces that I can measure and record into my job so that if I need to move my instrument to a different location, I always have at least 3 or 4 or 5 control points that I can measure to get my instrument established in the new position. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys just a couple examples of how we can do that. So the first thing I need to do is go to measure and go to collect. And inside here, we've got a couple options. We can either collect a point or we can collect a line that has, we can collect points that have lines connecting the dots essentially. It's up to you. I usually just like to go with points, but play around with it. And one of the things that we want to do here is we want to go to the input form button. And in this particular example, I'm going to create some additional control points on my job site. And I want to be a little bit specific about not only the name, but the description and the layer. Now, if my layer doesn't exist, and this is kind of important, I don't just want to put them on any old layer. I want to put them on a layer that's going to make sense to me. And if I go to the ellipse and my layer isn't in the list, I need to create that layer first before I can do this. So I'm actually going to take a step back and show you guys how to do that. So rather than go straight into here, I'm going to go to more and I'm going to go to the map, because what I'm after is my layer button right here. And here's my layer button. And in here now I can create a new layer. So I'm going to create a new layer, and this is going to be called field control. And that means it's not control that the surveyor gave me, it's not control that the GC gave me, it's control that I made myself. You can really give it any kind of name that you want. Okay, so now that I've created that layer, I can close this and I can get back into my measure and collect and then my input form. So I want this first point that I'm going to be collecting, I'm going to give it an abbreviation and I'm going to call it FCP1. Field control point 1. You can give it any kind of a name that you want. Description, we're not going to call it Bob. We're going to call it north side of building. All right. And then layer. So here we go. Now I don't want layer 0. I want to go find that layer that I just created. Field control points. And I believe actually there it is right here. So there's the layer that I created. Okay. So now any point that I create is going to be called FCP1, or it's going to start with FCP1, I should say that. And now we can go and measure those points. So I'm going to get back out of the input form button so I can see my map. And I'm in prism mode, and so I'm going to walk around with the prism, and I'm going to collect a couple additional control points. So I'm going to zoom in to the area that I'm focusing on, and right here is where I'm currently stationed. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move around to a couple predetermined spots on my job site and hit the measure button. So I'll go do that now. Okay, so I've moved my prism pole kind of next to this equipment piece here, and I've got my prism pole set on the point that I want to record. And I also made sure that my prism pole is plumb. And now I can hit the measure button. It lets me know it stored that observation, or it stored that measurement, and it lets me know that this is FCP1. Okay, now if I were to click on that point and identify it, there it is. It's FCP1. It's on the north side of the building, and the layer that it's on is field control. And here are its XYZ coordinates. Okay, so it's that simple. I'm going to go and record a couple more just because I can. Okay, so there's where I want to put my second point. Again, you saw the cursor kind of move around to where I am. That's me with the prism pole. I've set my prism pole on top of the point that I want to measure. I made sure that it's plumb, and now I can hit measure. Okay, observation stored. It stored my measurement. And again, it automatically labels these points for me. FCP1, FCP2, FCP3, so on and so forth. And the nice thing about that is I don't have to worry about my numbering thing. Let's say I forgot though. Let's say I came back the next day and measured it again. All I would have to do is enter in FCP1 as my point, and when I hit measure, it would jump to the next available number in that sequence. So I don't have to write a bunch of stuff down or try and remember. Okay, so that's measuring with the prism pole. All right. The next thing I can do is I can measure with the laser. And this one's pretty slick because I really don't have to move. I can set up shop kind of right around where the instrument is, and I can come up to this button here and switch it from prism mode to laser mode. And we call it DR, direct reflex, is the official patented term for it. I call it laser mode. You got prism mode and you got laser mode. And so what I can do now is I can point the laser at a wall or object on the wall, or maybe I've taken the time and created some targets. We've got some that you can buy. I used white duct tape and a Sharpie marker to create a little bullseye. And what I can do is I can point that laser, okay, and I'll point that laser at the wall, okay, probably not right in the middle of a doorway, so maybe I'll go over just a little bit more. All right, so now I'm creating that point on that wall, and again, I can simply just hit measure. Okay. Now in this particular example, what's happening is it's letting me know that that point that I just measured is actually beyond my farthest control point. And that's not a good thing. And here's why. If you think about angular accuracy, the farther away you get from the center of that robotic total station, you can add inaccuracy to your point. And this is a message that lets us know that, hey, you shot it beyond your farthest control point, so therefore this point may not be as accurate. It doesn't tell you exactly numbers, but it just says, hey, this is a warning. Maybe you don't want to do that. Okay. So I'm going to close this out. I can come back and delete this later. I'm going to pick a better point. So I'm going to turn my laser to a different location on that wall and find a different spot and then put a different piece of tape up with a bullseye on it. And then I'll go ahead and hit measure. Okay. So it jumped from FCP3 to FCP4. Here's that point right there. And so now I've added some additional control points. All right. Now one of the things that I forgot to do though is I forgot to put a checkbox that shows that I want these to be an exact control point. Now what happens here is if I move my laser again, all right, and I'll move it just down the wall a little bit, and I'll measure this point, what you're going to see is that symbol, again, it's telling me observation stored. You're going to see that symbol. Let me move my laser so you can see that a little bit better. It shows a different type of a symbol. This symbol with the circle with the triangle in it represents a control point. Now, I forgot to do that on my first 3. So luckily, I'm not dead in the water. One of the things that I can do is I can fix it. So to fix that, I'm going to go to Create, and I'm going to go to Points, and I'm going to select those points that I accidentally forgot to change to a control point. So there's FCP4, FCP3, FCP2, and FCP1. So now I'll go to the Input Form button, because remember I want to interface with this, so I want to go to the Input Form. Okay, and here I can actually edit that point, and I can simply say these were supposed to be control points, and I can apply that edit. So now it says, okay, good job, green toast, you've done that. So now all those points are represented with a triangle. Okay, so a couple different ways that you can collect points, either with the prism or with the laser. I use the example of collecting control points, but again, this really could be anything on the job site that you wish to measure its location.